Hi, in this video I'm going to be talking about how to prevent panic attacks. I'm Orla Kirby, I'm a therapist and I specialise in working with people to help them move themselves away from severe anxiety and or OCD. I do this combining NLP and also solution-focused hypnotherapy. And essentially by the end of working with people, I really want those people to be able to really deeply connect with calm, with their own creativity and their own vision of how they want their life to be, and kind of feel able to move in that direction. So in terms of how to prevent panic attacks, this video is really about how to do this long term, right? If you're someone who's having panic attacks right now, and that's either sometimes or maybe it's frequent, how do you go to a place where you're not having them at all, right? Not for years and years and years. If you're more looking for a video about how to prevent them in terms of, I feel like there might be one coming up in 5 minutes and I'd like it to not happen. I've got a video on that a little bit earlier, which is called How to Stop a Panic Attack. How to see a panic attack coming and make it less difficult to experience, or even prevent it altogether. So that's a different video a little bit earlier in the series. But this video is more about that kind of long-term, deep work of, I'd like to actually stop having them altogether, right? How do I do that? So the answer here, essentially, it is therapy, right? Now you might just think, of course she'd say that, she's a therapist. However, it really is very true that for most people, particularly perhaps not if you've had panic attacks after quite a difficult event happening, and if you had a relatively okay childhood and there's just something quite difficult that's just happened just recently, and then there's some time between that event and now, and you get lots of support from family and friends, and your mental health is okay. Otherwise, that might be just something that will go away by itself, right? However, in most situations where people are having panic attacks, particularly regular or frequent panic attacks, actually that isn't something that goes away by itself, right? And it's actually quite hard to get that to go away by itself on your own, right? Really quite challenging. I'm not going to say impossible, right? There's definitely people who probably have done that through, I guess, maybe learning hypnosis or meditation very intensively, or through studying something that helps them in some way. And in terms of therapy, I'm very open to many different forms of therapy, and I think it's really important to find a form of therapy that works for you. And that might be different things for different people, and different people for different people, right? And depending on your own personality, your own learning style, it might be a couple of different things for the one person, right? You might get this thing that you need from this kind of therapy or work, and this kind of other thing that you need from this other form of therapy or work, right? I'm using a really wide version of therapy here, right? To include something like counselling and psychotherapy, also hypnotherapy, NLP, which is what I do, art therapy, drama therapy, shamanic healing, acupuncture, energy work, right? All of these things I think can be really valid and useful and transformative, right? What I'm really saying is that it's difficult to make that long-term shift away from panic attacks by yourself, right? You can certainly massively improve things, so it's absolutely, if therapy isn't a possibility for you right now, or any of that kind of work with a professional isn't a possibility for you right now, absolutely do feel and know that you can make things significantly better on your own, using books, using YouTube videos, using podcasts. Mainly, I would really advise learning hypnosis, learning meditation, and there's other things you can do as well. Have a little look at my how to shift yourself away from anxiety. I think it's called 7 Strategies to Move Yourself Away from Anxiety. Those videos would all be contain lots of strategies you can do, right? As well as hypnosis. There's hypnosis there, but there's other things you can do too that you can just do by yourself that will absolutely improve things, and they might mean that you have less frequent panic attacks, or that the panic attacks aren't as bad when you do experience them, or you feel like you can cope with them more, right? All of that is 100% doable by yourself. Absolutely. In terms of absolutely ending them, right, and not experiencing a panic attack again, in general, I think that is going to require some form of help from a person who is an expert in something, right? So why is this? This is because panic attacks generally are, and this may be really clear to you already, or you may have no idea why you're having panic attacks, right? So there's a really wide range there. Sorry, I keep knocking my camera. that is, so the reason why it may need, an acupuncturist or an energy healer or a therapist or, like a trauma coach or, someone like that to help with this is because generally panic attacks come from trauma, right? So they are going to be a result of something linking with something else in your mind that kind of throws you back into a state of panic. And it's almost like you're re-experiencing a past panic or a past intense emotion of some kind, right? So that is going to need to be cleared in some way, right? And different therapies would do this in different ways. Counselling or psychotherapy, as I understand it, the idea is that you talk through these things and you form narratives and you gain insights and you're processing the information as you are telling the story and you're forming those narratives with the therapist, right? And that helps you to release the emotion in that way. You're almost reliving it cathartically and while in a safe place, and then you're able to release the emotion that way. With the kind of work that I do, we do it under deep hypnosis, and one of the main ways that I would release trauma when working with people would be to use timeline therapy, and you kind of go back along someone's imagined form of time, which is the way that you organize your memories, and you go back to a very early memory of, for example, fear. So fear when you were a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old, and you connect with that memory, but not in a direct way, not when you're not in the memory looking through your own eyes, but kind of like from a comfortable distance. And then at that comfortable distance from the memory, you shift yourself into a higher state, right, where you're connected with what you believe in, what you love, what you're passionate about, what you think is really important, these high ideas. And that shift changes the memory, right? And the memory can't exist in the same way. The emotion is released. You've had all this learning and processing. You've reorganized things in your mind. And that's a huge change, right? And then you can apply that forward through the whole timeline, right? Because every memory of fear is going to be linked to every other memory of fear. So having done that here, you can then apply that really quickly through the timeline, right? It's an active process of imagination where you can, shift all the way through the timeline up to now. And you do that with all of the 5 main negative emotions, right? Which is anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt, right? And there's certain other things you do to finish up, like shifting limiting beliefs or decisions and bringing different parts of the self together. So that is one example of the way that I do that with people. Or also from a more solution-focused hypnotherapy point of view, the idea there is that actually the brain is every night doing a lot of processing and releasing of stored emotion, unless there is kind of high stress getting in the way of that. So when we're dreaming, when we're in that REM state, we are doing a lot of releasing, if that's all functioning in the ideal way, in the way that it does, if you're a child and nothing terrible has happened, then actually we have this wonderful inbuilt machine for releasing trauma, for releasing stored emotion from the past. But every night when we dream, things are moved around, there's a lot of this processing and shifting happens, and we release emotion, and we wake up feeling very different about that thing. However, if our stress levels are too high, if there's too much negative thinking about the past or too much negative thinking about the future, and that produces stress, that whole dreaming mechanism stops working quite as well as it would otherwise. And then, it's necessary to kind of re-establish a much more deeply relaxed mental state and a much more kind of balanced and kind of enthusiastic approach to the positive elements of life, right? So that you're feeling kind of happier and more confident and more calm on a day-to-day basis about the life that's happening now. And then because you're doing that, your brain is in this lovely state where there's much lower stress levels. And then when you go to sleep at night, your brain is therefore able to do that processing much more easily. It's additionally more able to do that because you're learning hypnosis the whole time. So then your brain is able to kind of almost relearn how to do that dream state in a really ideal way. Because when you're in hypnosis, it's very similar to what your brain does in a kind of ideal dreaming state. So you listen to a hypnosis track as you're going to sleep, and that kind of reteaches your brain how to dream in a really effective way. And you can also release emotion and release trauma that way. So, that's just some examples for you. There would be so many other different ways of releasing trauma, releasing stored negative emotion from the past. And And really, some of that work is what needs to happen to really make that fundamental shift away from panic attacks, right? To go from someone who has panic attacks a few times a year, or even a few times a week, or, you know, some people a few times a day, to someone who never has panic attacks, right? Or, you know, who goes for years and years and years without having panic attacks. For that amount of change to take place, there needs to be some release of the stored negative emotion that is causing it in the first place, right? Just to give a little example of what I mean, you might already be familiar with this kind of thing, but say, for example, if I always have a panic attack when, say when I'm going into supermarkets, right? It might seem like, well, hang on, I've never had anything terrible happen in a supermarket. So why would it be, why would that be stressful for me? But there may be something symbolic. What do supermarkets mean to you? Maybe what does food mean to you? You know, what was the earliest time you went to a supermarket, and who was it that you went to the supermarket with? And it's going to be quite hard. It's a bit like dreams, teasing these things out. And the thing is that with many forms of therapy, you don't actually need to know at the outset exactly what the issue is, or, you know, how come that trigger is there, right? The processes can function without that prior knowledge, right? So, you know, and sometimes it can be very hard to work out actually, whichever form of therapy you're using, what definitely happened when you were 2 or when you were 4, because the memories that we form then are very different to the memories that we'd have later on anyway. However, there definitely is a way to release the stored emotions. Sometimes it might be unclear whether you're releasing stored emotion from an actual memory or from something that's more like a symbol of, you know, that's just kind of carrying the emotion. And in a way, in terms of recovery, that doesn't matter too much. As long as you're releasing the emotion, that is then going to mean that you can then go into a supermarket and feel fine, because the memory might be activated or it might not. But even if it is, the memory is no longer this hugely emotional memory because you've released the emotion, right? So that's the real kind of underlying thing that needs sorting to shift yourself away from panic attacks altogether. Yeah. Okay, so in the next video, I'm going to talk about how to comfort yourself and calm yourself down after a panic attack. And if you like these videos, do like the video and subscribe underneath, and I'll see you in the next video.